Welcome to your doom.
Let me drive. I should drive.
At this point, we're starting at the 2-minute motherfucker.
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. These are your harbingers of doom. These are Atul, and these are Justin.
This is Justin.
How's it going, man?
So far so good.
Sorry, I'm feeling a little. I'm feeling a little tired. I got to tell you.
You seem tired.
I'm a little
yawning
tired.
like a big baby.
Yeah, I'm a little tired. Yeah, I got something to talk about.
I did too.
Good.
I just started watching Ash versus the Evil Dead.
Oh, I saw the first season of that.
It's been out for a long time, and I love the Evil Dead series, as you know, and I don't know why I was sleeping on it aside from just no time.
Yeah.
Now that it's on Netflix, it's like the perfect time to start watching it.
Absolutely.
Holy shit.
It is a doozy. It is a lot of fun. That show is. So did you how far in are you?
I got through the first season.
Oh, okay. So you got through the first season.
Just cracked the second season.
Yeah, I haven't opened the second season yet, but man, I did enjoy that show. It very much plays right into that wheelhouse of the films, perfectly.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
And some great effects in that show, great practical effects, some wild monster
Raimi's
makeup.
been known for that though. He's always been pretty good at not sneaking because he doesn't sneak. It's always usually pretty.
Yeah, it's in your face,
gratuitous.
Yeah.
But it looks good. It's to me so far, it's actually the best interpretation of the Ash character. I think he keeps evolving. He keeps getting better.
Yeah.
Every movie he gets better. He's better
that's
in
right.
Army of Darkness than he was in the second. Definitely better than.
When you say better, you mean what do you mean?
More entertaining, more interesting of a character.
Okay, yeah. There's more nuance. There's more nuance.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And they have a lot of time in the show. I didn't realize that when I was going to watch it, that it was only 25 minutes or half-hour episodes. Excuse me. But that keeps things brisk, It doesn't get inflated. I feel like a lot of TV shows now, I won't even watch them because there's
You have to stay in front of the mic, homie.
yeah, there's
You don't have to go into it. What are you doing?
Hello. Hello. I am inside the microphone now.
Don't ever do that again.
It keeps it brisk. I feel like a lot of shows are, they're like a gas. They'll just expand to whatever time it's given to them. So if you have an hour-long show that's on for 13 or 14 episodes a season, I'm like, that's just too much.
Yeah.
Especially if there's 7 seasons.
Yeah.
I love shows that are... I'm watching a lot of 6-episode shows, miniseries. One show I was watching is Hap and Leonard. It's on Netflix. It's a really good show, but there's 6 episodes, and each of them are 50 minutes long. It's great. Fargo's another one. 10 episodes, each an hour long, but then each season is an anthology season. So it's one doesn't have anything to do with the other.
Nice. That's always good.
Yeah, so I do like Ash and the Evil Dead. Ash versus the Evil Dead. Unfortunately canceled after season 3, and it's unfortunate, but I think that I still have to watch 2 and 3, seasons 2 and 3, so I still feel lucky that there's an Ash TV show that has 3 seasons. I think that's pretty cool.
And we live in a world now, I think, where it's. I had to take this off my ear. We live in a world now where if a show is canceled and it's good, that's not necessarily the end of a show.
That's true. That's true. Case in point on what was Lock and Key.
Lock and Key, yeah.
Yeah, they filmed the pilot for Hulu, and then Hulu didn't want it, and Netflix picked it up. Is that right? Or Amazon.
Or Netflix is considering it, or picked it up.
No, they've picked it up.
They picked it up
yeah,
fully?
They've picked it up, yeah. So that's pretty wild. You're right. So there's always a chance.
Yeah, and I mean, Netflix has the distribution rights, at least in Canada right now, for it. I think it was I was just in the States, obviously, so I think it was there too, but I didn't really watch Netflix, so I was down there. But
cool, yeah, no, I mean, if anybody hasn't seen it yet, and you're a fan of horror, or obviously if you're a fan of The Evil Dead, you've probably seen it already, but yeah, no, I highly recommend it. It's a great show.
Absolutely.
I had something.
Go ahead.
There's a miniseries on AMC, speaking of miniseries, called The Terror. And it's based on a book that I read a few years ago, which I really enjoyed. I had no idea they were making a TV series, and then suddenly they're making this TV series, and the book was okay. Like, it wasn't that good, but I always, when I was reading it, I'm like, this would make a great TV series when I was reading it. And Ridley Scott produced this TV series. I saw the pilot. It's absolutely gorgeous, and it's about the John Franklin expedition to find the Northwest Passage.
Yeah.
And it's a period piece. 2 ships, the Erebus and the Terror. The Terror is the name of the ship, but also evocative of the atmosphere of the show.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's about this. It's a historical fiction because this actually happened. All the characters are real people based on the manifest of the ships. They went out there, they disappeared, and nobody saw them again. They started finding remnants of the ships, of bodies and stuff like that, and some journal entries. But they also add a supernatural element of something on the ice. They get stuck on the ice on their ships, and something on the ice stalking them. So it's a wonderful. I saw the pilot. It's incredibly well produced, gorgeous, lots of great actors, and so highly recommend watching it. I'm waiting for it to come out on Blu-ray before I watch it. But AMC just greenlit a second season.
Nice.
But it's an anthology show. Meaning that the first season of The Terror has nothing to do with the second season, and they're still calling it The Terror, but it's about the era of World War II and the treatment of Japanese Americans in the United States. Huh. They had internment camps in the actual United States to segregate Japanese Americans from the population during World War II. And then they're going to take a supernatural spin on that as well. The show is still called The Terror.
Yeah.
Whereas The Terror had directly something to do with the original series in the book because one of the ships was named The Terror. Now they're using that as a way to be like, oh, it's The Terror, but it's a description of the atmosphere of the show. It's each season is going to be historical fiction. It's going to take a period of time and add a supernatural twist to it. So I'm really excited about this. This is like right in my wheelhouse. I love it. It's 10 episodes. It's not too long. So if there's like 10 seasons of The Terror, I don't need to watch 10 seasons of The Terror. I can watch one season and get a complete story, and then watch the next one and get a complete story, not having to watch the previous one. So I'm really excited about this. This is an amazing idea. This is the kind of stuff that I love. I love them going through. What I'd like even better is if they reuse the same actors. But I think American Horror Story does the same thing, which I haven't seen yet, but I heard it's pretty good as well. So I might get into that. It's wonderful. I love the idea, and these are no joke. They're extremely well cast, well funded, like looks gorgeous. So I'm really excited about that. I haven't seen all of The Terror yet. I'm gonna buy it on Blu-ray when it comes out and watch it, in the home theater. Didn't want to watch it on anything else. But yeah, no, that's just something I'm really excited about.
Well, I'd like to tell you, as you were talking, I looked it up. The Terror is sitting at 93% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I feel so validated.
Right?
I'm so validated. Look, everyone, it's 93% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Guess what, though?
Science. You should go see it.
Ash vs. the Evil Dead is 99%, motherfucker.
That means it's objectively better.
Objectively.
It's objectively better. Scientifically proven, Ash vs. the Evil Dead is better than The Terror.
I'm trying to see what the reviews, like the number of reviews and shit.
Oh, it doesn't matter, does it?
I don't know. Does it?
Well, that's an interesting question because we're going to be talking about Rotten Tomatoes today.
Good segue.
Yeah. We're going to be talking about Rotten Tomatoes, so let's just jump right into it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Rotten Tomatoes and its effect on on the industry.
The industry, the general populace, everything.
Everything. Let's talk about what Rotten Tomatoes is a little bit. I read a little bit. I did a little bit of research. I'm no journalist, but I read somebody else's research on it, and I'm taking it as the truth. Rotten Tomatoes is a review aggregator, as everybody knows. But a little word on how it works. It's interesting. You can become a Rotten Tomatoes verified critic by I guess you submit your own profile and you meet a certain criteria. I looked at it briefly on the Rotten Tomatoes site. Not really important for the sake of this particular argument, but there is a method to become
There's a barrier to entry.
Yeah, there's a barrier to entry. It's not just anybody.
It's a considerable amount. I looked it up too. And
it's like you have to be a publication. You have to be active. Like,
several reviews, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah,
there's
all that stuff.
quite a few.
And it also, so you submit your profile, you become a Rotten Tomatoes critic, and then to get your score onto Rotten Tomatoes, at least I think this article is maybe from a year and a half or 2 years, a year and a half ago maybe, but in order to get your score onto the site, so Ash vs. the Evil Dead sitting here at 98%, that first season there?
Yeah, just the first season.
To get your critical review on there, you have to submit it. So I had originally thought that there were tags built into the websites, like Rotten Tomatoes has partnered with you as a critic or your publication as a critic, and they've embedded tags on the website that are like, hey, this review on this page, this is fresh or rotten. That's how I thought it worked, and I thought they programmatically scraped that to pull the reviews together. But according to this report or article, you actually have to submit it. So someone representative from the publication or the critic themselves will take their review, submit it to Rotten Tomatoes, and they have full control. They can control what blurb appears above their review. Whether it's obviously rotten or fresh, so they do have like control over that kind of stuff. The other method is that someone from Rotten Tomatoes submits on the critic's behalf, I think, so they can go and scrape for reviews, talk to the critics, submit on their behalf, and if the critic doesn't like that means that the Rotten Tomatoes employee is actually saying whether this is a rotten or fresh review. Okay. If the critic doesn't like the representation, they can contact Rotten Tomatoes and tell them that, hey, that's not what I want it to be. I want it to be fresh, or I want it to be the opposite. Whatever it is. So that's kind of how it works. Now, if somebody out there knows more than I do, or more from this 2-year-old article, then yeah, please let me know. I'm very curious about the mechanics of the process, but for all intents and purposes, not directly related to, our argument here, but really what we're going to be talking about is Rotten Tomatoes and how it's changed people's consumption of movies. I'm not really talking about box office and numbers, although that will likely come up. I'm just more of it's the social environment around films and the acceptance of opinion. That's kind of like what I wanted to talk about. The reason I want to bring that up is because I think if I were to go by Rotten Tomatoes alone and think about my favorite movies, and I watch a lot of movies, I have a pretty open mind about films. I'd like to think that there are things that I'm like, oh, I kind of want to see that, and I never do. That happens from time to time.
Sure.
But if I were to go by Rotten Tomatoes alone, I think I basically have the worst taste in films. Like, I have really bad taste in movies, and I kind of find myself having to defend that stance. And I've had a lot of people throw Rotten Tomatoes at me. Not literally, but, the website ratings, Think pet peeves of mine, jump in whenever you want. I'm just monologuing
I'm
here.
I'm waiting for something to jump in on.
Right. So
you haven't said anything I don't overtly agree with, or overtly disagree with.
This just might be 40 minutes of me monologuing, but
we'll see how it goes.
One of my pet peeves is like things that just get under my skin is when someone says, when you say like, hey, did you check out Solo, for example, or whatever, any movie? Check it out. It's like, no, that movie's shit. Like, that's the response that I get from a lot of people that, like, whatever, that movie's shit, or that movie's garbage, or that movie's crap. And like, that's it. That's the entirety of like the assessment of this film, of this piece of art. And there are a couple of things that I've found. One is that it's like that's a total blanket statement, right? So without any sort of nuance to go with it. A lot of people have nuanced opinions, which is why we do this podcast to begin with, and why our episodes are a little over an hour long, because go figure, you have, complex feelings about something that lasts 2 hours, or a video game that takes 40 hours to finish, like you have complex feelings that can't be summed up in a single thumbs up or thumbs down, right?
Sure.
So this is crap, this is garbage. So that's the one thing. It's like a very succinct sort of opinion that's not, inviting any sort of conversation.
Yeah.
The second thing is sometimes they haven't even seen the movie.
That's what I was going to get to. Now, when people are saying it's crap and this and that, in my opinion, anytime I'm talking to somebody and they say this movie's crap, it's either one of two things. Mm-hmm. I've seen the film myself, or somebody I know and trust very much has seen the film as well, and they told me it's shit, so I didn't bother. I have not spoken to anybody outside of our circle who are more technologically driven, and who look at stuff like Rotten Tomatoes. It's just us that usually will look at that and might say, I saw it on Rotten Tomatoes, but we never let that drive it. Most of the time, it's word of mouth or like their own experiences.
Right.
I don't know. I don't disagree that Rotten Tomatoes has had an influence on people seeing films and people's opinions, but I haven't felt that personally yet. I'm sorry you've had to defend yourself.
I've totally
these Neanderthals.
I've tried. But I know that there are moments that I've had interacting with people where oh, that movie's shit. I'm like, oh yeah, well I didn't I saw it and yesterday, or I saw it the other day, and I kind of liked it. I like this about it. I like that. I didn't like this about it. And they're like, and I'm like, oh, so like, what didn't you like? It's like, oh, I haven't seen it, but look at the Rotten Tomato score. It's shit. Like, why would I waste my time watching that movie? That's where like the bomb goes off, and I'm like that. It gets right under my skin, and I'm just like, ugh, don't be a drone. Having said that, I'm not an elitist. I'm not like peace, love, and watch every movie because you can only formulate an opinion if you experience it, which is true, but you can't experience everything all the time.
No.
And you have to make choices. And people, can't afford to go to every movie that comes out. And I completely understand that. But there is that tenuous connection when you see something interesting. Something that's interesting to you, and you decide not to experience it due to a single aggregated number based on a series of critics whose nuanced opinions you haven't seen.
Yeah.
Basically, their opinions have been scrubbed to be forced to give the rotten or fresh rating. And you're basing it on this.
Yeah.
I could get a movie that's 50% on Rotten Tomatoes, and everyone was kind of the middle of the road. It's like they kind of liked things about it, they kind of didn't like things about it. What does that say about a movie? Forget 50%. You could have one sitting at 20% like that, because interpretation of a middle-of-the-road review may be showing up as a rotten review.
Yeah,
right?
But here's the thing, is people making their decision, the decision is 50%. It's either I'm going to see the film or I'm not going to go see the film. It might even be a little more nuanced in that I'm going to go see the film while it's in the theaters and it's more expensive, or I'm going to go and see the movie when it's not expensive and I can just do this, or I can pirate it, or I can do this or that, whatever people want to do. But that's the thing, is why I think that reviewers, not even talking about Rotten Tomatoes, reviews have been around for as long as I can remember.
Right. Yeah,
obviously, right?
Yeah, no, this is nothing.
I remember looking at Peter, whatever the fuck.
Peter Howell.
That's
I fucking hate that.
I
guy.
hated him too.
Oh,
I didn't like his opinions because they always clashed with mine. Every fucking time.
Because I disagree with him.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing: is that's a good thing. At least for me, it was. Whenever I was reading the newspaper, God, that was a while ago.
This is the Toronto Star.
Yeah, the Toronto Star.
Yeah.
And he would write these reviews, and I'd be reading them, and I'm like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? I didn't agree with him. I was super excited to see that movie. I see he's giving it 2 stars. I'd be a little bit bummed.
Yeah.
That maybe it's not good, but fuck this guy, and I'm gonna go see it. And then I form my own opinion on it. And I think that's important. I think that when you're looking at opinions of just a single person, you kind of have that fuck this guy kind of thing. I want to see that. But you also, when you start looking at aggregates, you gotta have kind of the same mentality in that, let the aggregates kind of inform you one way or the other.
Yep.
Here's kind of my scale. I look at this as, I do use Rotten Tomatoes. I like Rotten Tomatoes. But the problem is that I like Rotten Tomatoes knowing that it could be negatively affecting the movie industry.
So you mean like box office, people going to see the movie?
Just people going to see the films or even evaluate them themselves.
Right.
I don't care about like the money aspect of it is important because it determines whether films get made or not. Vis-a-vis the Star Wars spin-offs.
Sure. Yeah.
But that kind of drives how things are done in the movie industries is perception and money, right? If Rotten Tomatoes is showing me here's my scale. This is how I use Rotten Tomatoes. If I want to see the film and it gets less than 10%, I'm not going to see it in the theater because I'm like, this movie is probably pretty bad. Unless I really want to see it for a very strong reason. 10%'s that cutoff.
10%?
10% or less.
But so let me ask you this. You see a score of 10%.
Yeah.
How, why is that the cutoff and not 15?
It's arbitrary. It is arbitrary. I use 10% as just a guideline for what I have seen. So I've seen movies that are in the teens percentile, and I've liked them, despite what Rotten Tomatoes has said. It's rare, and I don't know how. I'd have to go through Rotten Tomatoes to try and find a film that I liked that was less than 10%. Do you have one queued up?
I've got a couple of examples here. Some like not that particular example, but I have examples of points.
So, anyways, back to my scale. So 10% and less. Even if I wanted to see it and I see less than 10%, I'm not wasting my time. I got shit to do. Right? Yeah. That's one. If it's between 10% and 50%, I think if I wanted to go and see it, I'll go still check it out. I just go in there with lowered expectations, and I end up enjoying the movie more.
Sure.
Between 50% and like, I'll say 85%, it's a crapshoot. If I wanted to see it and it's between there, I'm definitely going to see it.
Right.
My expectations are about where they are.
Right.
I'll experience however I experience.
Right.
If it's above 85% or 90 in that range, and I wanted to see it, I know that I'm going to probably like it.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I've actually gone to films like that and been let down because of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I guess that's what I'm getting at, is that the percentile is affecting your perception of the film, which I think, like you said, reviews have been around since there's been art. Critics were birthed at the same time like artists were birthed. Like for every artist you have like 50 critics.
That painter ain't shit. Can you paint that? Nah.
Yeah, I can't.
Nah.
I can tell you what's wrong with it though.
Yeah.
And yes, but it's that kind of like, it sets an expectation. And it's like just even that little psychological click, right? You're setting an expectation based on an aggregated view of reviews of which you haven't actually read them. We've not read the 130 reviews that were aggregated. Somebody has to go in and scrub the data. Like when you go in and you scrub data and you make it conform to hard and fast rules, you're losing detail, right?
Absolutely.
And when you lose detail, you lose nuance. And when you lose nuance, the truth of the data, some of it disappears, right? And that's kind of where I have an issue. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to do this initially. Yeah. Was because, we have nuanced opinions. We have hour-long talks about movies, even about movies we don't like.
Hour-long is that's us trying to keep it
Hour
short.
and 17, we seem to nail that. We're going to nail it on this one, too.
We're about that.
Yeah. So, there are complex feelings. And maybe some people don't. Like, a lot of people don't. I really, Shagu, she'll watch a movie and be like, how did you feel about it? I was okay. And she's okay with just it being okay. Yeah. She doesn't feel the need to have to explain what okay feels like. And that's okay, right? Yeah. But, for me, I guess I've always like gone to a movie and it's like, how did I feel about that movie? Well, how much time you got?
Yeah. Well, that's honestly, that's for movies that I feel like are divisive. Well, maybe not actually, because you'll talk about stuff that is good and bad in good and bad movies. There
are good movies, objectively
I've heard
good
this
films
podcast before.
Yeah. There are objectively good movies that I have fundamental problems with. There are what are widely considered to be bad movies that I love. Speaking of like bad or contradictory
You just call them bad movies. Stop.
No, they're not. They're not bad movies. They are. No. There are films that are reviewed poorly.
Yes.
But people love.
Yeah.
They are like bona fide classics. The first one I'm going to mention off the top of my head, which is not really true. I'm looking at a list on my phone. Yeah. Spaceballs, 57% on Rotten Tomatoes. I just think that's wildly inaccurate. You know, like Spaceballs is referenced as one of like the best parody films of all time. You know, and it's 57% on Rotten Tomatoes. So that's just one example. The Sandlot, another movie that is a bona fide classic in my opinion, and in the opinion of, I guess, my generation.
Yeah.
56% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, The Mummy, which I actually think is a pretty good movie, sitting at 57%. I think that's kind of fair, sort of, maybe.
Yeah.
A Knight's Tale is 58%.
What was Taken?
Taken was 58%.
Son of a bitch.
It's
one of my favorite action movies in the last few years.
So, Die Hard with a Vengeance, which I think is a great action movie, great action film, is sitting at 52%. Mm-hmm. There are two other examples I want to give you of the opposite, or at least what I consider to be the opposite, being sort of a part of this geek community, and like you kind of hear the general consensus on a lot of films.
Sure.
The first one, I'm going to load it up here really quick because I don't want to bullshit the number. A film, Superman Returns, with Brandon Routh. 75% certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes.
That's like 74% more than it deserved.
Exactly. So you see that feeling where anybody who talks about Superman Returns in forums and things, and I read a lot of forums, and I get, we talked about this where I just can't help myself. I've seen a lot of general opinion, and that's not a real statistic. It is something that I do. Generally, people do not like this movie. They think it's not very good. They think it's like weird, creepy Superman, and they get a lot of the, it's not a good movie.
Yeah.
And it's sitting at 75% certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Another example I have, real quick. Sorry, I should have had these loaded on a tab here. Another movie that is widely shat on, and probably even more widely than Superman Returns, is Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. Here's the thing.
Go
Not
ahead.
You or I actually like this movie.
I do too.
I like this movie.
But I'm ready to acknowledge the fact that it's not a great film.
Yeah, that's right. No, me too.
I know what it is. It's a guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
It's a fun movie.
Yeah.
But you got it. How would you describe it to somebody that hasn't seen it? First of all, what's the rating?
70% on Rotten Tomatoes.
That's higher than I think it deserves, but I enjoyed the fuck out of it.
Exactly. So those are
I'm
two,
happy it's at 70.
Yeah. But see, that's another weird tie-in. It's like, if there's a movie you're rooting for and it doesn't get a high review, or movies you like don't get high reviews, it almost affects you personally, doesn't it? It's kind of like, oh, that sucks. Why does it suck? Think about that. Why do you feel like that's something that's it sucks because it's something you like, right? And that people's first exposure to what this film is going to be is the Rotten Tomatoes score. It will be.
Yeah.
It almost always will be.
And
again, I'm making that up based on... sorry, I'm not making that up. I'm basing that on personal experience. Like when someone goes to watch movies, like, hey, I told them about this movie, and it's called, like The 13th Floor, which was another movie on that list that I liked a lot, but it got really awful reviews.
Yeah.
They'll be like, look it up on Rotten Tomatoes. Or like 30%. I don't know what the score was, but it's very low.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, nah, don't
Yeah,
don't have the time.
Sell it. You got to be a salesman if you want people to expose this.
You can sell it all you like.
Yeah.
But when somebody goes home and looks it up on Rotten Tomatoes, which they will do, that's what they do, because that is the mecca for general opinion.
Yeah.
And the movie scores low, that translates to your opinion of films. You like a certain type of movie, or you like films that generally people don't like, or that have low scores. It's kind of a reflection of you. Now it's quantified. It's like there's a score. There's a single number that could represent your taste in movies. Mm-hmm. And that is not accurate. It's not an accurate number, and I think that a lot of people won't experience new things or take on suggestions, as an example, right? Based strictly on that number.
I don't think that it paints one person's opinion per se. I think that it paints their range. I'm looking at this like a poker player, right? Mm-hmm. Poker players, a lot of times, they'll look at things like, this is the range of cards that these people will play. For instance, say you're playing Texas Hold'em, right?
Yep.
You're playing against a person that's playing super tight. If all of a sudden they go into a hand, you can probably think that their range of cards that they might have like ace, king, aces, pocket pair, something. They've got a very limited range of cards they would play because they're playing so tight. Yeah. Whereas there are other players that are more loose.
Take more chances.
Their range of cards could be anything, right?
Right.
And that is a risk and reward thing, right? Sometimes you'll go into a hand that you really had no business being in with the 2 cards you have, but all of a sudden you flop the nuts, right?
Right.
Which I don't know what state.
I don't know what
flopping the nuts.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm just nodding.
Anyways, so what I'm getting at is that with films, it's the same thing, right? Is if somebody says, "Oh, did you see this film? Yeah, I saw that film. I loved it." Well, yeah, so did everybody else. I saw this film and I loved it. Yeah, well, so did everybody else. You kind of know what the range of the person is they're kind of going along with the crowd, right?
Sure.
But then, and the thing is with those type of people, you're not going to be able to convince them that, hey, this film I saw, it's an interesting film, blah, 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 blah. If they look up the Rotten Tomatoes score and all of a sudden they make the decision that, hey, I'm not going to go see that Rotten Tomatoes sold me soul, you're not going to be able to convince them, right?
It's definitely ice skating uphill. Huh?
That was a good one.
Huh? You like that?
That was good.
I've never used that in a sentence before, but here we are.
It worked.
You're right. I agree with you. I think there's a certain mentality that wants things rolled up. Yeah. You know, like wants things aggregated. Not everybody has all the time in the world to watch these movies, and I totally like I get that. I get that, but here's where a lot of my personal opinion, kind of my personality comes into this. Books. Let's talk about books for a minute. I go to Goodreads.
Okay.
So, and I'm actively tracking like what I'm going to read and what I'm going to read next. Choosing the next book for me to read is an ordeal. And I'll tell you why. It's an ordeal because I like to read, but I read fucking slowly. Very, very slowly. Like, it takes me 6 months to finish a book, okay?
Yeah.
Having said, so think about that. If I chose the next book, I'm not one to stop reading in the middle of a book. When can I formulate an opinion about a book that's 900 pages long? When does that opinion come along? Is it the first chapter? Is it the first half? Is it 3/4 in? And I'm sure that's even if you can't even answer that, because for me it's probably depending on the book, right? Everything could be great and the ending could be awful, like that kind of thing. You feel cheated at the end. By the end of the book, if I find that I didn't like the book, I've already spent 6 months reading this book to formulate that opinion, right?
Yeah.
That is not a short amount of time. I only have so much time on this earth, right? So I look at reviews for books. I read a little bit about them. I learn about their plot a little bit, like I have to. I feel like I have to because it just takes so much time, right? It takes a lot of time. Now, when my opinion on films, it's 2 hours, typically, let's say. I think, for me, personally, that 2 hours can be a gamble. It can be a gamble for me. And I don't need, what I need to be is interested in the content of the film, of course.
Sure.
But I don't need to do the research. I don't need to look up the Rotten Tomatoes in order to decide whether I'm going to watch a movie because, let's be honest, not a lot of films right now cost 15, 16 hard-earned Canadian dollars to go see them in the theater, right? You can watch them on Netflix, on Amazon, services you guys already have, or, other other nefarious methods of
which
of
we're not promoting.
Yeah, that's correct, but it that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So.
Yes.
So there are ways to watch and to experience these movies. 2 hours of your time, much less the 6 months.
Sure.
For me, it just doesn't. It doesn't add up to narrow your experience to only what is sort of ultimately like Rotten Tomatoes guiding the socially accepted good film. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where my grievance is with this whole thing, is that Rotten Tomatoes does drive socially acceptable, good films.
In terms of like public recognition.
Public recognition, or even personal. I'm talking about like
personal,
if you're standing with a group of friends and you're like, hey, you know, one of my favorite movies is Deep Blue Sea. I fucking love that movie. I do. I'm using that as an example because I pretty much had this conversation.
Yeah.
You know, where everyone's talking about The Godfather 2 and I'm trying to think of another, like, I would say Citizen Kane. I haven't seen Citizen Kane, so I haven't seen The Godfather 2. I haven't seen The Godfather 1. So, like, bringing that up in a context where you're, with cinephiles, there's a lot of snobbery, right? But now the snobbery has what is being marketed as, or is being accepted as deterministic numbers to prove that you are in fact wrong about how good this movie is.
I disagree when you're talking about like cinephiles, right? Like people that, for those who don't know, cinephiles, people that love films, basically, right?
Yeah.
Really into films. I have yet to meet a cinephile, a proper cinephile that lets that Rotten Tomatoes review really drive their opinion. I've met. I've seen trolls on the internet. That's a different story.
I agree. I don't think that it governs their opinion.
Yeah.
But it's there. It's there. It's backup. It's there. Like, they don't need to, like, do they need to defend themselves? If I came up to someone and said, you know what, The Godfather 2 is an awful movie, do they need to defend themselves? They don't. They could just point to Rotten Tomatoes and say, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Right? But, if I'm like, hey, Deep Blue Sea is a fucking fantastic movie, I have something to prove.
No, but you still have something to prove if you say something about The Godfather 2 as well, to a cinephile, to anybody, really. Like,
No, as far as a defensive stance goes, like, if I came up to you and said Godfather 2 is an awful film, the person who is being approached with this, opinion that is not of the social order has nothing to say. They don't need to say anything because they have deterministic data, a number that can show you. They can just point you to one website and just tell you that, hey, you know what? You've got awful taste in movies, right?
That's an argument, but the thing is all of those arguments are essentially an argument, right? Like you saying Godfather 2 is a bad
Not
movie.
that this is a real argument I've ever had. I've never had this real argument.
Right. But like saying that,
and not
like,
that you
Godfather
shouldn't have
2,
this argument. You should. You should go out there and be like, Deep Blue Sea is a better movie than The Godfather 2. Go out there, people.
If you do that, anybody, I will find you and slap you, because The Godfather 2 is a goddamn masterpiece.
Because Deep Blue Sea is in fact better than The Godfather 2. All right, here we go.
You're out of your mind. Look at the Rotten Tomato score.
Yeah, that's right.
No, I mean, as soon as you say anything, as soon as you give your opinion, and if that person doesn't agree with it, you've made the first argument, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
So if their next argument is, yeah, look at the Rotten Tomato score, it's a weak argument, in my opinion.
I'm not saying that's so, like, I guess what I'm saying is that that's not what they're going to do. They're not going to be like, hey, look at this, like literally do that. But they've got deterministic analysis to back them up if they can't verbally convince you.
Sure.
It's like, it's like this silver lining underneath that they can stand on.
Yeah.
And feel confident that, hey, my opinion is actually socially correct because Rotten Tomatoes tells me what's good. Mm-hmm. And it tells me that what you like is not good.
See, I think that Rotten Tomatoes as a whole is a good thing to have out there in general. And just if not for anything else, just for a heads up kind of display on what movies are. I mean, executives, the company I work for, we do all kinds of stuff, but one of the pieces we do are, heads up displays about like, reports on how we're doing this year and how much have we sold, how much are we spending, da. If all of a sudden those numbers are low, they're not looking into hey, why is this low?
They're just like
these numbers are low. Somebody figure it out,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then somebody has to go and do that.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden, somebody that their department is probably doing really well is like, why am I getting shit on right now? Everything's good on my side, right?
Yep.
That's kind of how this is, right?
Sure, yeah.
There are all these movies out there that, for some reason or another, there's a consensus that builds. Be it, I mean, in this case, it's opinion, right? But those consensuses are all similar. Consensuses. Is it actually consensi? Consensi. Consensi. So it's like everything's going in one direction, right? Like if there's an agreement on a film that it's like 30% of people liked it, but 70% didn't, that's a piece of information. Now, it's definitely within the user's confines that they need to figure out how to use that information. Is that going to be my end-all, be-all? Is that how I'm going to determine whether I'm going to see this film or not? Well, that's probably not a good way to live your life. If you're going to let the masses tell you what to do, right? It's just uninformed. But if you have no interest in seeing it and then you see a 30%, you're like, oh, fuck, I don't care. I really don't care.
But that's reaffirming an already sort of level, an already negative outlook, which is the job of, the marketing campaign, right? I think and I'm not immune to this, by the way. It happens to me too. Sure. I see movies that I'm like, oh, I'm kind of interested in that, and I see the Rotten Tomatoes score like 25%, and it's scary because I don't know what's happening half the time. I don't. It's like people's use of their smartphones. It's so ingrained that they're not even sure. Like when they grab the phone, it's like they're possessed.
Yeah.
Like they're not even sure what they're doing until they're doing it. And it's happening. It's autopilot. You see this information. You're inundated with this information. You see the score. Even for a guy like me, that's kind of like pretty. I'm pretty bullish about being like, don't be a drone. Go see everything. Spend all your money and like go see everything. Like ideally, of course.
Yeah.
I'm affected by the number too. Like I don't make as hard an effort. I eventually see stuff. I don't make as hard an effort to watch it. If it's a low score, and that's happened to me before, and I don't even know what's happening. Yeah, that's what's kind of scary about this whole thing, and it can happen to anybody, especially for someone like me who's slowly realizing that it happens. It affects whether I see something, even though I'm actively trying not to let it affect whether I see something. Like a good example of this is, and now I don't go to the theater a lot. But I still haven't seen it, is Valerian. Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, that Luc Besson movie, that was kind of like a spiritual successor to The Fifth Element. I still want to see that movie. I saw it got low ratings, and it's not that I don't want to see it anymore. I do, and I will. It's just I haven't seen it yet, and that's telling. That's telling of, and it wasn't even like horrific reviews. I'd say they're all like middle to negative, right? But and I'm using that as an example because I was just looking the other day at my watch list. I'm like, oh shit, I haven't seen Valerian yet, that kind of thing. But and there's a reason for that. And I think, thinking back, I'm like, oh, I'm kind of bummed that it didn't get like half decent reviews, and then other things came and it got buried. But would it have gotten buried if it got 90% on Rotten Tomatoes? I don't think so. I think it's something I would have seen already. And that's all under the covers. And I'm not actively thinking about it. I don't think people know. I don't think people are aware that this thing affects their opinion. It does.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. There's no question about that. If you see that people think it's negative, it's going to affect you one way or the other. In the case of Valerian, there's so much stuff. There's so much content being released all the time. There's always stuff to do. Sometimes if you kind of want to see a movie and then something tells you that might not be worth seeing right away, you bury it, like you said, right? It just goes back to the, push it to the back burner, push it to the back burner. Then other stuff keeps coming and you're prioritizing. Prioritizing is kind of a big deal when you're a fucking adult, right?
Sure. No, you're right.
When you were younger and shit, it was easier to just throw on movies and do whatever because the number of responsibilities we had were easier, right? But as you get older, I see Rotten Tomatoes as kind of a good tool to be able to kind of help me drive priorities in terms of, okay, I really want to see this movie based on both how much I actually want to see the film. Rotten Tomatoes, marketing be damned. Like if a Marvel Studios movie's coming out or one of the DC ones, I'm all in. I don't really care what the critics say. I'm still going to see it.
Yeah.
That's just how I'm built. Star Wars, same thing. Like, I'm going to see it. But if it's not of that franchise and I don't really have a very built-in... Like, look at Ash vs. the Evil Dead, for instance, right?
Yep.
I wanted to see that really badly. And
it got great.
And it got great reviews.
But you never got to it.
And I never got to
Yeah.
it. And it wasn't because of Well, it kind of was because of prioritization in that case, because a series is a bigger investment.
Oh, I didn't even mention that. Yes.
Yeah.
So we talked about the books.
Yeah.
But to a lesser extent, even tying back to our intro discussion, like a television series is also something you want to read about.
Right.
Because that could be 12 hours for one season. It got
Agreed.
7 seasons.
Yeah.
You're not gonna dive, like, who's gonna dive into that, like, without knowing, without getting an opinion, whether it's from Rotten Tomatoes or their friends or family or whoever, right?
Now, here's the thing: is I never looked at the Rotten Tomatoes review for that. The first time I had seen that it was 99%, 100% for the other 2 seasons for both of them was just now.
Didn't that make you happy though?
It made me happy, but I don't know if that would have influenced me to see it earlier than I did now.
Sure.
So again, it's potentially using a tool that's out there to my benefit. Like the circle of friends that we have, it's like you and me that would really go and see Ash vs. the Evil Dead, and my buddy Matt in LA.
Yeah.
But like, outside of that, my circle of friends, that's not kind of their bag.
Right, but
so I'm not getting that reaffirmation that you should definitely go and check this film out. There's times where I'll be like hang out with my brother, and then I'll say, hey, did you see this? He's like, nah, I don't know. Like Solo, for instance. Like, did you see Solo? He's like, nah, not really. I don't know how. Dude, go see it. You will really, really enjoy it. I guarantee.
So, that's the one thing I do like about your brother is that while he's a discerning a film goer, I guess.
Yeah.
Meaning, but he also listens to opinions,
absolutely,
people's opinions. So like if you come out and say, hey, you know what, like you see this, like I wasn't really interested, but then you say, you know, you should go see it, I think you're actually really going to like it. He's not going to be looking at Rotten Tomatoes or anything. He'll go when you formulate his own opinion, and his own opinion may be, you were totally wrong, I fucking hated that movie.
Yeah,
entirely possible, right? But he takes that leap. You know, he can take that leap. I wanted to jump through just a couple of like sample movies of films that I think don't have great Rotten Tomato scores at all, but I absolutely love.
Okay.
Right? I'm just going to run through these off the top, stop and talk about any of them, or even look them up, actually. The 13th Warrior, The Ghost in the Darkness, the RoboCop remake, Oblivion, Kingdom of Heaven, the director's cut, although I think that's widely appreciated as being a better movie than the theatrical cut. King Arthur, Antoine Fuqua's King Arthur, Terminator 3, Alien Resurrection, Alien 3, Constantine, Dead Man on Campus, Nothing to Lose, Ravenous, Starship Troopers, Ghostbusters 2, Dragonheart, Treasure Planet, Disney's Dinosaur, Abominable, Gremlins 2, The Siege with Denzel Washington, Spy Game with Robert Redford.
I feel like we need to send me this after so I can list this in the description.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm just going through this just so it's on the the record kind of thing. The Last Samurai, Lake Placid, fucking love that movie. Deep Rising, America's Sweetheart, Sky High, Fright Night, the remake.
Deep Rising, the porno, right?
Yeah.
That's the one, right?
Yeah, that's the one.
Excellent.
Justice League and Michael Keaton's Jack Frost. That's like a list of movies that I'm kind of like, I like these movies, and I don't think a lot of other people like them very much.
Roger Ebert only gave it 1.5 out of 4 stars.
Well, then, you know what? I just like bad movies, Justin.
Yeah.
Yeah, 33% on Rotten Tomatoes for The 13th Warrior. And while I think that movie is actually a pretty great adventure movie, can you look up The Ghost in the Darkness real quick?
Sure. That's the what's that?
That's the Ghost in the Darkness is the story about them building a bridge in Savo, Africa. Val Kilmer and Michael Douglas. 2 lions attack them while they're building the bridge. It's kind of like an African adventure story. When animals attack kind of story. Oh, it's sitting at 50%. That's actually higher than I thought it was going to be. Mm-hmm. But these movies are movies that I like that have bad Rotten Tomatoes scores. That these are hard to recommend. Like, let's talk about recommendations. When you give recommendations to people,
I set them up as best I can.
I try to as well. I try to learn about what they like.
Yeah.
The other pet peeve I have. I got a lot of pet peeves. They're all in cages at home. When people give opinions saying, oh, you should go see this movie, it's great, they know nothing about me. Like, they don't know what I like. They didn't even ask. When I recommend a film, I'll ask you, like, what kind of movies do you like? What have you seen lately? Like, I love having that discussion with people. What have you seen lately that you've liked? What's even more interesting is, like, what have you seen lately that you haven't liked? You know, you learn a little bit. I'm not talking about, you know, like reading a biography. This is a 5-minute conversation. You know? And you kind of get that trajectory of what they're on, and then you recommend a film. And if I see a trajectory they're on when we have this conversation, and I have a film to recommend, and I know it's widely accepted and widely liked, how do I sell it? I let Rotten Tomatoes sell it for me.
Get the fuck out of here.
I'm like,
actually, you know what? I do the same thing.
I actually don't have to. I know as a recommender that I don't have to explain it too much. I'm just like, hey, look, there's this movie. It's a drama. You know, there's like Wonder Boys, one of my favorite movies. I recommend that when people have seen dramas that they've
porno?
liked. Yeah, the Wonder Boys, the porno. And I'm like, you know, if I'm recommending this movie, I'm just like, look, it's a great movie. It's like kind of in your wheelhouse. Here, check out the link I send them to the movie isn't the IMDb page. It's not the Metacritic page. It's not the fucking website for the film. It's the Rotten Tomatoes website. Because it's sitting at whatever, 80, 90%.
Yeah.
If there's a movie like The Ghost in the Darkness that I'm recommending to someone, right? That I'm like, this is a great adventure movie when they used to go on location and shoot like all their movies on location, practical effects, gorgeous cinematography. I don't send them a Rotten Tomatoes score. No. I don't send them that link. I just send them the IMDb link, or I send them like the wiki or like whatever. Yeah. Or I send them a trailer.
Yeah,
I'll do that. I'll send them a trailer. But if there is, but this is all stuff that's happening under the hood.
Yeah.
Like in my recommendation algorithm in my head, right? That's what's happening. I know socially Rotten Tomato is where these things lie. And I know when I can leverage Rotten Tomatoes to convince someone to watch something that I've recommended. I also know when I can't use it because the score isn't high enough. And that has an effect on people's opinions on whether they're actually going to watch it or not.
So you're using Rotten Tomatoes in this way and in other ways that I think that is the way to use this as a tool. Rotten Tomatoes at the end of the day...
I'm totally manipulating it, though.
No, you're not. No.
I feel like I'm manipulating it.
You're using it as a tool for your own means, which is what everybody should be doing. Their own means are, am I going to see this film or not, right? Rotten Tomatoes is that tool that can help inform your opinion one way or the other. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing. I think that it's only good if the person is, I don't want to say smart enough, but intuitive enough to know that it is only a tool. A tool.
Oh, Justin. The 80s want their joke back.
Nobody was named Uthal in the 80s. Get the fuck out of here.
I was. I grew up. I was born in 84.
You were barely a person.
I was being called a tool in 89, for sure.
Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, same year Batman came out, I was at school and someone called me a tool.
That's what you get for being named that way.
Yeah, well, you know what? Blame my parents.
I can.
I know.
Give them a call.
Can you will.
No, right. Okay, so back to what I was saying. So it's a tool that should be used for one's own means, right? Yeah. That means is to whether or not you are going to see a film. It can also be used on your side as whether or not I'm going to recommend this film to people and how I use it as a tool to convince them of it.
I will modify that slightly.
Sure.
It's not whether or not I'm going to recommend this movie to
a person. That's what I was getting at.
It is, how am I going to get this person
to
see this movie because I'm convinced based on a conversation I've had with them that they're going to like it.
Yeah.
So how do I do that? Is Rotten Tomatoes my friend or my enemy?
Yeah.
And in the case you got, what do you got right here? You got the RoboCop remake up, which I think it's a great movie.
Yep.
I'm not using Rotten Tomatoes to sell that.
No, I wouldn't either. But there are times where I'll mention it in a conversation and be like, because for instance, this movie I loved. I thought it was a very fun action film. I had a great time with it.
I enjoyed it as well.
Anytime I'm talking to somebody, like if I was recommending this to somebody, I'd say that exact phrase. It's like, it's not the same as the old RoboCop series, if you're a fan of that or not. It's a more mainstream action film.
Yeah.
Pretty good effects, really good action, fun character, or not fun,
but I mean, like,
entertaining character.
Stands on its own.
Stands on its own,
separately.
But if you look at Rotten Tomatoes, it's not very high. Sometimes I'll throw that in there because I don't want somebody to go in there or
be surprised.
discover it. Not that they'll be surprised.
Rickroll.
I will actually tell them what I think. It's just I don't want them to go to Rotten Tomatoes later and be like, "Hey, what the fuck? This guy recommended this. Why is it sitting at 50%?" But I'll slip it in and be like, it's like 50% on Rotten Tomatoes, but like that's because it's not Citizen Kane or something. Like I'll say something like that and be like, it's just a fun action movie. Like I guarantee I'll have a good time. Same with Solo, the way I sold it to my brother, and that's the way I sell things that I think that are fun that aren't positively received on Rotten Tomatoes. But that's like you got to give a caveat with that.
But just even that fear.
Yeah.
That fear. I mean, fear is a strong word.
Sure.
But I mean to say like that fear that your recommendation will not be viewed or will not be given its due based on a real conversation you're having with someone, based on understanding what this person likes.
Yeah.
That it will not be taken seriously given a rolled up aggregate number on Rotten Tomatoes. Mm-hmm. That fear or that's what I have a problem with.
Yeah.
It's kind of like and this isn't solvable. And by the way, I'm not saying Rotten Tomatoes shouldn't exist. Mm-hmm. It sounds like I'm bashing them. I'm not. They're actually not doing it. They have no opinion on films. Rotten Tomatoes themselves are just trying to aggregate data because that's what we love.
Yeah. As
a society now, that's what we love. Everything needs to be rolled up. People can't even steal shit one at a time. They have to have it all rolled up. You know? Like it's and in that roll up of data, nuance disappears. How many people, or how many times have I done this? And forget how many people, because I've done this. And the reason that I'm opinionated about it, because I'm that person too, right? It happens to me. How many headlines have I read? Just the headlines.
Yeah.
And other people start talking about incidences, like expecting me to know about them and talking about them. How many times I'm like, yeah, I read about that today. Did I read about it? No, I read a 2-line headline.
Yeah.
Right? I know nothing about this fucking incident. I don't know what you're talking about. But maybe it's not that bad. Maybe I can glean something from a conversation and kind of jump in with my opinion or whatever, but I didn't read the article.
Yeah.
We're not a lot of article readers, and that's what Rotten Tomatoes is doing, giving people what they want. Summaries. Which brings me to the critical consensus part, which I read nothing about of how it's put together or how it works. That's written by a human being.
Oh, absolutely. I'd wager it's probably like somebody at Rotten Tomatoes goes through all of them.
Exactly. Yeah. What are they doing? Are they looking at headlines and writing the critical... It's like the critical consensus. Let's read this out for RoboCop here. The remake. While it's far better than it could have been, Jose Padilha's RoboCop remake fails to offer a significant improvement over the original. How did someone come up with that? Did they read the headlines of all of the reviews? How many are here? Let's not talk shit.
201 reviews.
201 reviews. You think this asshole at Rotten Tomatoes went through and read 201 reviews and was like, you know what? Here's the general consensus. No, they're giving the general consensus slathered in their own opinion because they're a human being and they can't prevent it. They're not a machine, right? So it's like, you've got a roll up of fresh or rotten reviews to give you a percentage.
Yeah.
Then on top of that, you have some human being giving you a written critical consensus synopsis based on their interpretation of 201 reviews.
Yeah.
It's like we're starting to really lose detail here.
Sure.
It's like a lot of details just disappear.
But I will say this is it's not often that I'll read that critic's consensus thing and be wildly in disagreement with it. I don't think I've ever really been in disagreement with it.
It's not to say they just I'm not saying they do a bad job.
Right. Now with this one, this is all true. It's not better than the original, and it could have been it says it's far better than it could have been. Yeah, I guess it could have been garbage. I don't think
it kind of goes for any movie.
Exactly. That's what I'm getting at. I think that this is actually not a great critical consensus because it's not telling me anything aside from it's not as good as the original, which sure, the fucking original RoboCop is amazing. You
know what the critical consensus is the equivalent of? It's like the equivalent of like a crystal ball reading or a tarot card reading.
Yeah.
But like a scam artist.
Sure.
It tells you that, hey, you're going to wake up today, eat something, and then go to sleep later. that's what these are. They're kind of like these general statements. And that's what people read. If they're not looking at the number, the next thing they're looking at is the critical consensus.
Yeah.
And then if they're forced to scroll down and look at the headlines for all the reviews.
Yeah, or excerpts basically, but like
excerpts.
Like I said,
a phrase or
critical
two.
consensus for Alien Resurrection marks a slight improvement over its predecessor, but still lacks emotional stakes that helped make the franchise's first 2 entries in the sci-fi horror classic.
Do you realize that is pretty much exactly the same statement as
the last one?
RoboCop
I absolutely agree. But unfortunately, like that's the thing is you've got to be smart enough to read that and be like, okay, gotcha. But this does tell me about Alien Resurrection in a nutshell. All right, cool. It's okay, and it's not as good as the original 2. That's how I would describe. If somebody asked me, hey, should I see Terminator 3? That's literally how I would describe it. I have a lot of fun with it.
I'm sure,
but it's really not in the same vein as the first 2.
Actually, I'm sure it's almost exactly the same as those. It's like, hey, not as good as the first 2.
You said that one was sitting at 70%.
That's actually much better. But I'm sure it's like
it's probably
a more positive spin, but with the same sentiment.
Although T3 never reaches the heights of the second movie, it's a welcome addition to the Terminator franchise.
Terminator.
That's
yeah.
It's not wrong.
It's
like
so
that's
funny.
Honestly how I would frame it to somebody. Because the thing is, if you see T1, very serious movie, right? Serious horror on the cusp of horror.
I maintain T1 is a slasher film.
Yeah,
I think
that's a fair way to look at it. Then you look at T2, and it takes itself very seriously, but it's one of the best sequels of all time, in my opinion. And then T3 comes along, and it's a very different film. There's a lot of weird tongue-in-cheek comedy. Yeah. It doesn't play by the same rules as the others.
No.
Not as good as the others, but still an entertaining film. But that's exactly how I would frame it.
It's so funny that those three things, were they all sequel? Like, they were all sequels.
Those are all
right?
sequels. Let's show Ghostbusters 2. Thanks to the cast, Ghostbusters is reasonably amusing, but it lacks the charm, wit, and energy of its predecessor.
It happens to be that what we're looking at are sequels, but it's really funny to see that.
No consensus yet for
Ghost in the Darkness. Okay.
Only 46 reviews.
Yeah.
Atmospheric, great sets and costumes with thin plot. That was a lazy write. That's for the 13th Warrior.
The 13th Warrior, yeah. So it's I get what you're saying.
Do you disagree with that?
Do I disagree with that? Sorry. I don't know. Like,
would you not include that in? Would you include that it's got a thin plot in your recommendation to somebody? No, without looking at this, obviously.
No, I wouldn't say it has a thin plot. I would say it has enough plot to drive an adventure film.
Okay.
You know? Like, so I wouldn't agree with that. But there are a lot of these are built to like you don't. I mean, it's hard not to agree because they're so generic.
Sure.
You know, it's so funny that it happened to be sequels that we were looking at.
Yeah.
They're almost all exactly the same.
Yeah. Or remakes.
Or remakes. That's right. Yeah, sequels and remakes. Which is probably another conversation or another podcast.
Shit,
but
yeah. I'll mark that down. But yeah, no, I think that like honestly, like if you're listening to this podcast and you use Rotten Tomatoes as however you use the Rotten Tomatoes, look at it as a tool. Not a tool. Because honestly, that's what it is. It can help you inform your decision a little bit, but don't let that be the sole driver as to whether you see or don't see films. Have your own opinion. If you had some interest in a film, but all of a sudden you see that it's like, oh, it's only 50%. 50% means jack shit in the grand scheme of things, right?
That's right.
I've seen so many, like literally all the ones you mentioned here are 50, aside from 13th Warrior, which is 33%, RoboCop's 49, Alien Resurrection's 55, Ghostbusters 2's 53. I didn't like Ghostbusters 2 as much, but Ghost in the Darkness is 50%. Like all of these are sitting around this 50% mark. Like I said with my scale before, I think I said 10 and 85. Anything in the middle, in my opinion, is fair game. It could mean that I'm going to love the shit out of it, and it could mean I'm going to hate it.
Yeah.
Anything over 85, I'd be hard pressed to see some films that I was like, I really, really, really didn't like that film.
Right.
Or on the other opposite of the spectrum is less than 10% that I've seen that I really, really liked that film. Right.
Right.
But to your point of compartmentalizing some of that, there's stuff that you like out of them. Like
I think that comes down to personality. I think a lot of people don't function, don't experience films the way I do, which is actually like that's what's wonderful about art. It's different for everybody. I happen to be able to, when I watch a movie, this is a good one. When I watch a movie, I can enjoy it there are a couple of different types of, movies like that I see. For example, like I can watch a movie like Jason X, right? And be like, "Hey, I enjoyed the shit out of that movie." But I know it's a bad movie.
Yes.
Right? So you kind of like know it's a bad movie, and you would, when recommending it to somebody, you would say that. I mean, like, this isn't a good movie, but it's hella enjoyable.
Yes.
You're gonna have a good time. Now there are movies that I enjoy that I don't think are bad movies, that I don't think deserve the scores that they get, and I don't think that they deserve the shunning they get based on those scores, and that's like a different category of film.
But then there's some films that get all kinds of praise. Like, what was it? Paddington 2? It's the best film of all time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, exactly. Like, and that's a good example too, because it's like an inoffensive movie that what does a 99% or 100% mean? It means people generally liked it. You can have somebody that's on the fence and generally liked it, but just when they submitted their review, like we discussed at the beginning, decided to give a fresh rating.
Yeah.
It's thumbs up or thumbs down with zero nuance. Then you have a movie like Get Out, and when I was looking forward to Get Out for a long time. It came out 99% on Rotten Tomatoes. I was really happy. Why? Why am I happy? Why do I care? I care because I know that 99% is going to be the face of this movie when it comes out. It's going to be what's put on the advertisements. It's going to be what's put on the several years ago, maybe a decade ago, not even, maybe that's too long. Sorry, not a decade. Maybe like 7 years ago, I started seeing Rotten Tomatoes stickers on Blu-rays.
Yeah.
Did you start seeing that shit?
Yeah, I've seen that.
I was very surprised to start seeing that. But now it's used as a way to advertise for films. And that's the face of the movie. And then, I mean, we haven't even gotten into it, and I'm sure like we could talk about it some other time, but we talk about the audience scores and talk about film, producers downplaying Rotten Tomatoes as being that they're trying to combat Rotten Tomatoes, and audience scores versus critic scores and all of that stuff. We didn't even talk about that, but that's another big thing, because Rotten Tomatoes has become a way to formulate an opinion on a movie.
Yeah.
Because it's dictating whether people see things or not.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, there are a lot of studies, and I didn't do a ton of research. A lot of people are like, "Oh, it doesn't actually affect movies if you look at these numbers or those numbers." I'm just kind of talking from personal experience. Mm-hmm. People have not gone to see movies because they have low scores. I didn't go see Valerian in the theater, and I'm 90% sure my excitement for that movie was deflated by the Rotten Tomatoes score, unfortunately, and that's on me. And
I think it's a component. I don't think it's the major driver, which I don't think is what you're saying. It's a component of why people don't go to see the films. Like, for instance, Justice League, it had, I think it was 40% on Rotten Tomatoes or something. It was certified rotten, I guess, whatever. Or it was rotten, not certified. Yeah. But I mean, that was only a component of it. I got out of the film. I didn't enjoy it very much, but everybody else I spoke to, aside from like a couple of people, had either based it off of word of mouth from people that they know,
yeah,
or they saw it themselves and they didn't like it. Like,
right.
It's rare. Like, there's only a couple of people
yeah.
that I've spoken to that are like, "Yeah, I saw it," or no, sorry, "Yeah, I heard it's garbage. It's garbage. It's garbage. Did you see it? No, I heard it's garbage."
That's rarer now. Like that, I think that's for me. I still run into that. But oh shit, what was I gonna say when you said, what were you just saying before
Justice
that?
League,
Justice League,
Rotten Tomatoes.
They're not going to say they didn't enjoy it, or they're not going to reference Rotten Tomatoes ever. And that's kind of my point. It's happening. It's so ingrained in our culture. I don't need to reference Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten Tomatoes is framing every discussion in the background. Everyone knows what the Rotten Tomatoes score is. I mean, they do. They do. The majority of people do. They go to this site to see what's coming out next week for theater or whatever coming to theaters. They know. It's headlines. Headlines. Rotten Tomatoes score Jurassic World. Rotten Tomatoes score Thor Ragnarok. Rotten Tomatoes score Justice League. Let's talk about the Justice League Rotten Tomatoes score. There was a fucking hullabaloo for that because they held it back. Now they're doing this thing where they hold it. It's a media event.
Well, they've been
right?
holding back reviews for like that's not.
No. Rotten Tomatoes is holding back
they
the
held back
aggregate.
okay.
Not that the studio is not showing like the movie because they know what they have is trash or whatever.
No,
not
what
that.
I mean is that like they would allow critics to see the films.
There's an embargo.
Yeah, embargo. That's
Yeah,
the word it was.
that's right.
So this
that-
was something separate that Rotten
No,
Tomatoes did.
totally. Yeah, Rotten Tomatoes was displaying the reviews.
Yeah.
But what held back the aggregate score as a media event. Right? Because it's
owned
called
by
the
WB.
reveal. Yeah, the reveal or
Through
whatever.
Flickster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's
I
not
remember that
even talking about the WB thing. It's they're using the score reveal as a media event.
Sure.
Right? So it's like now for when Infinity War comes out, it's like stay tuned this Friday. We're going to reveal the total aggregate for the Infinity War.
Yeah, they did it on
of
some bullshit show or something like that.
They have a show, you know.
I remember now.
That all just reinforcing the fact that these scores are so important to people.
Yep.
Right? They are so important to people, and everyone knows about them, but it's happening underneath all of the data that we get, all of the opinions we're formulating. They're all guided by this, whether you know it or not. It's subconscious to the point where you don't even know it's happening.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I mean. You're never going to run into someone and be like, oh, Justice League, I didn't like it. It was awful, blah, blah, blah. That opinion guaranteed is, before they even saw it, they saw the Rotten Tomato score, and they're kind of, their frame of mind is set. And I'm going a little on a limb here, but that's just me. I'm like, they know what's acceptable. What's the easier conversation to have?
Yeah.
The easier conversation to have is Justice League was awful. I didn't like it, and you get a bunch of people agreeing with you, and yeah, it was terrible. Let's talk about how terrible it was.
Yeah.
Or being the guys like, hey, I actually came out, I kind of liked it. Explain yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and it's that kind of, you know, going with the flow kind of thing that happens under the covers. I think it happens.
Critical consensus for Justice League. Justice League leaps over a number of DC movies, but its single bound isn't enough to shed the murky aesthetic, thin characters, and chaotic action that continue to dog the franchise. See, now that's one I don't necessarily agree with the full way, right? I don't think it leaps over many of the DC films.
Well, which is fine. I mean,
Yeah.
that's fine. I mean, you can agree or disagree, and this goes both ways.
Yeah.
I think we've been focusing a little bit on movies that, you know, have gotten poor ratings that we like, but there are also movies that get wonderful ratings that we don't like. You know, and it works both ways.
True,
you know?
exactly.
So, what's the general message, or I don't know, like the PSA of this episode is, from my perspective, is like I'm not even sure. Like it's listen to your friends, like listen to people you trust.
Yeah.
You know, listen to people who know what you like.
Yeah.
You know, like if you've had it, like, and that doesn't mean that they have to be your parents or your closest friend. Someone who puts in an effort to say, hey, kind of like, what do you like? Are you gonna? He's like, you know, did you like the movie? I didn't really like the movie. But what kind of movies do you like? You like this, that. You might like this because it has these things or these, you know, these themes or whatever. You know, listen to someone who's actually listen to recommendations from people who've put in a little bit of effort to understand kind of what you like, and try not to be influenced by Rotten Tomatoes. Use it, like you said, use it as a tool. It can be a part of your sort of calculation. Yeah. It's just it's hard to even come up with anything because, like, you know, this all costs money.
Yeah.
You know, it all costs money and time, and that's what people are doing here. They're pruning. Yeah. You know, like they're only going to the things they know they're going to like, and I can't fault anybody for that. This is more of an opinion column. I can't fault anyone for that. That's right. I just think people should go out on a limb more often. If you think something looks cool, try it out. You know, try it out. Try not to let Rotten Tomatoes govern that decision entirely. While I realize it's impossible not to let it govern any part of the decision,
yeah,
try not to let it be 100%.
I think if you're already sold on going to see a film, don't go in with the Rotten Tomatoes score. Because I wanted Justice League to be successful, but as soon as I started seeing these Rotten Tomatoes reviews be more in the negatives, I knew it wasn't going to be that successful.
And we are watching the Rotten Tomatoes reviews, aren't we? Like for movies. There was another movie that the Belko Experiment, I recall, which we haven't seen yet.
I haven't seen it, yeah.
Right. That started, I remember you saying that it was a bummer that the reviews were coming out for the Belko Experiment, which James Gunn wrote, I think. And that were coming out, and they were negative.
Yeah.
It's a bummer. Why
Yeah.
is it a bummer? It's like that's the key. I feel like is the
because
yeah.
I generally know that if it doesn't have a high tomato score, it's probably not going to do. It's got a better chance of not doing well in the cinema.
Right.
In the old time cinema.
Yeah.
But that's why I want it. Like I want. It's not just for my own validation, right? That I love this movie. It's got to have a Rotten Tomato score high. I don't give a shit about that, really. Like I'm okay with being able to say I like this film.
Sure.
And it's like the first Ghost Rider film, I actually enjoyed for the most part.
Yeah.
That was 20-something% on Rotten Tomatoes, right?
Right.
Yeah, I just looked it up, so it was fresh.
Yeah.
But I don't even remember what I was going to say now. I've lost my train of thought. But essentially, use it as a tool. Like, don't go into films. I think it would be a good exercise to go into a film that you legitimately want to see and you want to go and buy tickets and just don't look at the Rotten Tomato score. Don't let it influence you one way or the other. Just go in, watch it for what it is, however much anticipation you have, and then go and see it. I need to practice that myself.
Ideally, I 100% agree with you, but fundamentally in our day and age, impossible. Especially for a movie that you're like, hey, I'm kind of excited about this. What do other people think?
Yeah.
Where do I go?
Yeah.
And it has an effect.
But like for this one, this was one I could have done. Justice League. I could have gone. I was going to see that. If somebody told me it was the worst movie they've ever seen, I'm still going to go and see that in the theaters because I want to see those characters on the screen.
Yeah,
it's my childhood, right?
Absolutely, I agree.
Same with Transformers for the most part.
Yeah.
Until lately, I didn't see
the one with the dragon.
The dragon one until I was on a plane and watched it on my phone. That's how little I care. And I watched it without sound because my wife stole these headphones.
Nisha, you're getting called out.
Yeah. No, it's good. She saved me from some... It was just fun watching Anthony Hopkins act without any sound.
Yeah.
That was the best
He's
part
very
of the film.
expressive.
Oh, absolutely.
He could be he's a good mime.
Any last thoughts?
No, that's it, man. I think I've really just like hammered some things home, and you guys know some things about me that you didn't know before, so I don't know. I'm going to have to listen to this one and see whether we air it or not.
Why wouldn't we air this?
I don't know.
Shut the fuck up. All right. This has been episode, whatever the hell episode number. This is Justin.
This is Atul.
Thanks for listening, guys. Have a good day.
Peace.
Cheers.